Hello, and welcome to Thingamajigs and another exciting history of a mundane thing. And if you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you could be entitled to a cash settlement. My name is Ben.
And I am Danielle. I remember that. Mesothelioma is probably the first disease I ever learned about because of those commercials. So first, let's talk about what asbestos is. Most of you probably already know, but let's just pretend that I'm telling you what it is for the first time.
I don't know if that's true, actually. Do people know what asbestos is? It's not really a household name anymore, I don't think.
I can't say that I really knew what asbestos was before doing this. If you say asbestos, everybody goes, ooh, because everybody knows that asbestos is bad.
Well, the old people do, but do the young people?
I'm pretty sure.
You think so? Comment.
We're pretty young.
Comment on the episode if you know what asbestos is. Let us know. You have to, no cheating. You can't listen to the episode and then go back and then leave your answer. You have to answer now. I'll give you a minute to type it out.
They're just going to write yes or no?
You can write yes and a short explanation. Now that would spoil it for everyone else. You have to say yes and then email us the explanation.
I don't think we're spoiling asbestos.
But you also have to say no if you don't know, and don't lie.
That's a new sentence. Spoiling asbestos results.
Spoiling asbestos, that's what mesothelioma did.
Oh, yeah, kind of. Asbestos is a fibrous silicate mineral. It's a naturally occurring substance, and there are 6 different types, but they're all made of that thin fibrous crystal. The most commonly used is the white asbestos, but there are other colors. You can get asbestos in blue. You can get asbestos in brown.
Call now.
3 easy payments of $49.99, and you can be the proud owner of blue asbestos for your wedding because you need something blue.
Match it with any outfit.
They all have special names. I didn't write the names down, but they all have their own names.
I want some blue asbestos now that we're talking about it.
No, you don't.
Now that you mention it, I need some blue asbestos.
So if you brush up against this stuff, it will break apart into these microscopic fibrils, and they get all in the air, like shaking out a dust cloth. Nothing makes you want to hold your breath like sun shining on the air at that perfect angle for you to see everything that we breathe in, especially after dusting.
Yeah.
We get the word asbestos from the Greek word, which is spelled differently because it's spelled with Greek letters, but essentially it means unquenchable or inextinguishable. And that brings us to probably the main point of why we even cared about it so much, why this story is even being told. Asbestos is an extremely fire-resistant material. Its melting point is, well, there are 6 different kinds. They have different melting points, but the highest is 1,904 degrees and the lowest is 1,112 degrees. I converted that to Fahrenheit. The government website I got those numbers from was in Celsius, and we all know how Danielle does not understand metric because she was born in a country full of rebels, unless of course it's centimeters and only if it's less than 10 centimeters.
Them's high numbers.
Yeah, that's hot. That is quite resilient material.
A miracle mineral, if you will.
Yeah, it's a godsend, right?
What could go wrong?
We have a naturally occurring mineral that can be put in everything, and everything that's made with it is fireproof. That's amazing. They used to put it in clay pots because it made it stronger and more fire resistant. Especially considering that fire was a huge part of ye olden time people's lives. You light your home, you warm your home, you cook with fire. Fire was a big part of your day, and fire has a habit of burning things down when unattended. It's also an increasing problem because as the population grows, more people are using fire and more people are becoming more densely populated together, which is even more fire all in one spot. It's a growing issue. Here are some things that you could get made from asbestos. Clothes, shoes, coin purses, wicks, pottery, anything made of cloth, so like tablecloths, blankets, all that could be made with asbestos.
Call now.
No, I'm not trying to sell asbestos. I want to make that really clear. We are not promoting asbestos. The Egyptians used it while embalming pharaohs. They would wrap them in asbestos cloths to help preserve the body. And the Persians used an asbestos cloth to contain cremation ashes to keep the body ashes from mixing with the fire ashes. Pure body.
That's a good idea. That was a clever use of asbestos.
Asbestos textiles were used a lot in religious ways. It was seen as kind of a magical thing, so I see why it was used in ceremonial rituals. Pliny the Elder wrote about asbestos cloths being a good way to ward off evil spirits and magic spells. Maybe Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility was made out of asbestos. Like the new unknown 7th type of asbestos.
Probably. And Pliny was probably right. We get rid of asbestos and look what happened to our society. It's all the evil spirits.
He also talked about like napkins that were made of asbestos that got dirty could just be thrown in a fire and they would come out cleaner than if they had been washed with water. Years later, Pliny the Younger would note that slaves that worked in the asbestos mines didn't seem to live very long, and you should avoid buying them. Not, hey, these people seem to be dying. We shouldn't put people in there. No, just don't buy those. They're a bad investment. The first mines for asbestos were in 3000 BC in Greece and Cyprus. Just for some aspect in time of how long ago that was before the Great Pyramids were built. So asbestos has been in human hands for an incredibly long time.
Human hands and lungs.
Oh. It was even mentioned that it's been around since the Stone Age, which I mean, obviously it was because it's a natural thing that just exists in our world, but you know what I mean. Some people think that the Bible story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do you remember the story?
I do. They were working for the king, and he said, you need to worship the big chocolate bunny, and they didn't do that, so he threw them in a furnace, but they were okay.
For those of you that don't know, VeggieTales has an excellent rendition. But anyway, it was that they were wearing asbestos clothes, and that helped protect them, along with, of course, the angel or God or whatever fourth figure that the king saw in the furnace with them. The Bible talks about their cloaks being unharmed and the rest of them as well. It might have been asbestos clothing. So I want to take you down a rabbit hole, or in this case, a salamander hole. Salamanders, what do they have to do with asbestos? Well, hang on, because this is where it starts to get weird. First, I want to state that salamanders are not lizards. In fact, they are closer to frogs than lizards, because lizards are reptiles and frogs are amphibians, and salamanders are amphibians, complete with soft, moist skin, gills when they're babies, very dependent on water. I mean, we're all dependent on water, but amphibians more than other creatures. They require a moist environment, which is probably why Louisiana has so many of them. So they tended to hang out in old wood. They like to crawl into piles of wood, and people like to burn wood. And because the salamanders were in the wood, they would of course not like that and want to run out of the fire. And that led people to believe that salamanders couldn't be burned and might even be born from fire. On the other hand, they might extinguish fire. There were some contradictory ideas. Forest fires was another example. So like salamanders can just run into a nearby pond or river and be just fine. So by the time people get out there and check out the damage, all these salamanders are walking around just fine and the charred remains, making it look like they're fireproof. So this idea that salamanders were fireproof collided with asbestos textiles, and we get salamander wool.
What's that now?
That's what they called cloths that were made out of asbestos. Oh, it's a salamander wool.
So it wasn't made with salamanders. That's good.
Well...
Oh boy.
No, it was not made with salamanders. So Aristotle had this belief that everything around us is elemental. So everything is connected to the elements, and that included animals. So for example, animals that fly are connected to air, and animals that swim are connected to water, and livestock, such like animals, are connected to earth. And he was hard pressed to find animals connected to fire, but the salamander is one. If he would have known about volcano snails or the scalyfoot snail, it's funny because they don't really have feet in the traditional sense. But it also lives under the water, so I guess I don't know how he would have categorized them, but they live in extreme heat, like some up to like 750 degrees. So I feel like that would be more connected to fire than water. They're snails that live in underwater volcanoes, and their shells, they're one of the few animals that their body is composed of metal. Like they have iron in them.
What?
They have iron shells. They're like knights in shining armor.
Is this like a low-level enemy from Final Fantasy? What's happening?
I'm surprised you haven't heard of the volcano snail. They are relatively new. I mean, they're not new, but we have relatively just recently discovered them.
Why aren't more people talking about these things? They're crazy.
So back to the salamander. This is a pretty prevailing idea. There's some fiction books where witches being burned at the stake turned themselves into salamanders. I didn't read these books, so I don't know if they turned themselves into little salamanders and ran away, or if they turned themselves into people-sized salamanders and just survived because they're fireproof. I don't know. So salamander wool. People started to believe that salamander wool, the cloth made from asbestos, was actually made from salamander fur.
Do they have fur?
No.
Okay.
I think it was a metaphor at first, and as time went on, people took it literally, which I completely understand. I would have also believed this. You'd have to just know many years of inside jokes and lore to not get confused, especially regarding a thing that was kind of rare at the time. It's not like everyone had asbestos textiles and salamanders. So Marco Polo sets off to China and found asbestos cloth. He called it salamander wool. He thought it came from salamanders, and his Turkish friend there told him, "No, silly, this comes from a rock in the ground, and when you crush it, it divides into fibers, and then you spin those fibers and make whatever cloth you want with it. And when it gets dirty, all you have to do is set it on fire, and it's magically clean again." It sounds like something from science fiction.
Along with volcano snails.
So if you ever noticed the Insulators Union logo and how it has what you probably thought was a lizard, but now know is a salamander, you know what all that means now.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the Insulators Union.
Did you ever wonder why they had a salamander on their logo?
I've never heard of them before. Is that a real thing? You're just making that up too.
I'm not making that up.
Making that up along with volcano snails.
It's a logo of a salamander sitting on top of a pipe and a fire under him. During the Crusades, so we're talking like 11th century, we have some reports from 1095 where knights were using this thing called a trebuchet.
The superior siege engine.
To hurl a flaming bag of tar over enemies and walls and stuff. So it was a bag made from asbestos filled with tar and lit on fire, and then it burst and got flaming tar all over everything. Quite effective.
Medieval napalm.
We still don't know much about it, about asbestos. We don't really know that it's dangerous. And I'm sorry, I know we've kind of jumped around in time there for a minute, but we are coming to the Enlightenment period. And that was a beautiful time of knowledge and science. But all that knowledge and science paved the way for the Industrial Revolution. And that catapulted us into a time of corporate greed like human civilization had never seen before.
It trebucheted us.
So here comes the 1800s, the first spark of the Industrial Revolution. Britain's a little ahead of us in that department. America has crowned her new ruler, King Supply and Queen Demand. Capitalism has won. But it's just a baby, and honestly, it's great. Things have never been better, and it's only going up. The 20th century is really going to peak. We won't talk about the 21st century, but hopefully we've fixed some things. The 21st century just started. There's plenty of time to write some good history. So the problem with our current rulers, supply and demand, is that supply doesn't really care whether demand is acting ethically. So demand asks for affordable, effective insulation, and supply gives us asbestos.
Yay.
And asbestos is one of those products that can do everything. Clothes for firefighters, fireproof paint, fireproof insulation, roofing tiles, building materials, asbestos cement pipes for water and sewer lines. In the early days of cars, it was in our brakes. Book covers, for crying out loud. We are truly a species of, if it's good for one thing, it must be good for everything. But why, I ask, do you really need a fireproof book cover?
We'll tell you in just a minute after we remind our viewers to call now while supplies last.
Stop. In 1918, we get the first glimmer of the U.S. government recognizing the risk of asbestos. The Bureau of Labor Statistics completes a report that reveals abnormally high risk of early death among asbestos workers. 1918 is pretty early on. Does it stop? No. We're using it mainly in the war effort. World War I was happening before we got this report. It was being used in cars and ships and trains. And then we get another warning. In the 1930s, we get the first diagnosed case of asbestosis. And on top of that, it seems that 25% of people working with this product is getting sick. So that's 1 out of every 4 workers. Did it stop? No. Why? Mostly because we've mechanized the process. Not only is it now effective, but it's getting cheaper. It's being put in hair dryers, irons, cigarette filters. That is like the world's worst cigarette.
That's a bad one.
Talk about shaking the pack to wake up the cancer. Not only were you inhaling smoke and tobacco and nicotine, but you're also inhaling, like, directly asbestos. From the 1920s to the 1960s, the United States accounted for up to 83% of consumption. That's a lot. The 1970s was kind of the peak, though. By the 80s, the news was getting out, and it was heavily affecting the market. Employees started filing lawsuits. We get the Clean Air Act that classified asbestos as a hazardous air pollutant. Mining was shut down in the United States in 2002, but we were still getting it imported. Just this year, in March, EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, banned the import and use of asbestos in our country. They have an amount of time to phase it out, so it will still take some time, and I don't know that it bans all 6 types of asbestos, so we might still be kind of fighting that battle.
Most of it definitely went away very quickly. There's not a lot of asbestos in the wild anymore.
We knew. I mean, yeah, plenty of the younger mentioned something fishy going on, but we knew even in the 1800s. In 1898, there was a report about asbestos manufacturing in England that cited widespread damage and injury of the lungs due to the dust surrounding the asbestos mill. We got the first documented death of an asbestos worker who died from pulmonary failure. The autopsy of that 33-year-old revealed insane amounts of asbestos fibers in his lungs, and your lungs don't really do anything about it. The only thing they can do is just start scarring. You get that in your lungs. It's not like they can self-clean. It just sits in there forever. And it can take some time for you to notice because your lungs have some wiggle room. They have a bit of excess capacity, but once that's full of asbestos scarring, your lungs can't get oxygen to your body properly. In 1908, insurance companies obviously got wind and wanted to protect their money, so they decreased coverage for people working with asbestos and increased their premiums. Because we knew in 1908. You know it's bad when the insurance companies get involved in whether or not your job receives coverage. That's a massive red flag. And it wasn't just the people who actually worked in these factories. Their spouses were exposed too. There was a clear excess of mesothelioma among spouses of workers in the asbestos industry. Or I guess anyone that lived domestically with you.
Yeah, because it was such small fibers, it would get super embedded into like all your clothes and everything. It would spread like a virus.
Mm-hmm.
It would spread better than a virus, frankly.
Global lobbyist groups have spent nearly $100 million since the 80s to protect the international asbestos market. And it's banned in 55 countries. So you know where the market is, where it's all coming from? Developing nations. They're like, hey, people still seem to want this product, but it's super dangerous. They don't want to. And in fact, it's illegal for them to source it themselves. We need money because we're so incredibly poor. Why don't we do it? And I don't even know if any of that money is actually making it to the workers. They're probably making like 50 cents and getting cancer because it's cancer or starve. I really hope we aren't actually on the cusp of a dark age where we lose scientific and social advancements. But who knows?
Well, social's out. Scientific's still on the move.
Russia and China are in deep. Russia is a huge producer and China is a huge consumer. There's a lot of people that live in those countries. I hesitate to call these fun facts. I have some sad facts.
Love sad facts. Who doesn't?
This first one's kind of fun. So Benjamin Franklin had a coin purse made of asbestos, and he liked to say it was so the money couldn't burn a hole in his pocket. Badoosh.
The listener can't hear it, but I'm shaking my head.
They get sadder as we go on. You know the snow from the movie Wizard of Oz? Yeah, asbestos. What's funny is the Wicked Witch says she has to send them poison that is pleasing to the eye and soothing to the smell. And she's talking about poppy flowers. But that is the scene where asbestos falls from the sky. This was common though. Remember It's a Wonderful Life? Yeah, asbestos.
There was a lot of snow in that movie.
Remember White Christmas? It's not a white Christmas without asbestos.
Like, there was a ton of snow in It's a Wonderful Life.
That is raw asbestos that
crawling around in it and
enveloped all of their airspace.
Getting it all over their faces.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes.
They tried other things like cotton batting, but cotton is flammable, and it was thought that asbestos was a safer choice. Curtains for big theaters could be made of asbestos for the same reason. Those giant curtains were a fire hazard. Asbestos was a popular way to flock your Christmas tree as well. So if you have any decorations from the 30s, 50s, 70s, maybe don't have those. So more people die of asbestos-related sicknesses than car crashes in the UK, at an astounding number of 5,000 compared to just over 1,700. Surprisingly, we are far closer than I thought we would be. In the U.S., has 39,000 people die of asbestos and 43,000 die in car crashes. That number is really close. Asbestos is far more dangerous than cigarettes. But you know what's more dangerous than cigarettes? Asbestos cigarettes. That's not a funny joke, but it is a funny joke. Asbestos thread was used to close incisions, like after lung surgery.
Why? There were surely better options for that. It's not like you're gonna burn. It's not a fire hazard.
Because it was one of those things that we were like, we can use this for everything. This is awesome. There's a city in Canada called Asbestos. Canada didn't shut down its mines until 2011.
Hope they had some personal protective equipment upgrades.
That's all I got. I hope that I have enlightened the world about asbestos. I think we all learned something today. If anything, we learned about salamanders and volcano snails.
Those things are crazy. God's wackiest invention.
Along with the platypus. Do you have any PSAs? If your home was built before the 80s, maybe get that checked out. When I say it was in everything, it was in everything. You'll watch the movie The Wizard of Oz and It's a Wonderful Life differently now.
Make your lungs itchy. Well, this has been Thingamajigs and another exciting history of a mundane thing. I hope you had a good 420.
It's our anniversary.
I hope you didn't blaze anything too much, what with the lack of asbestos in your walls. They just don't build them like they used to. Don't forget to grab a goose and make wool out of it instead.
No, you gotta get that salamander wool tablecloth and fascinate your guests with that thing where you pull the tablecloth really quickly off the table and nothing falls down, and then you throw it into the fireplace, and then you pull it out and it's perfectly clean.
Ah, yes, the classic party trick.
Yeah.
Know it well. Know it well. Thank you so much for listening.